Thank you for joining me in the garden today. I'm Liz Davey, and this is A Walk in the Garden, brought to you by NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable. Today we're in my herb garden, and it's a beautiful, beautiful day. Very warm for the season. It's only early May, but you'd think it was the middle of June. Unfortunately, this will change very soon, so you can't really garden based on today. You have to kind of look into the future a little bit too. We've had a beautiful spring season. It has been quite cool and quite rainy, which is very good, but we haven't had a frost since the end of April, and it doesn't look like we're going to get one. So it's time to start doing some planting in these upcoming days that are going to be kind of dreary and dark and maybe a little rain here and there. They are going to be excellent days for setting out some of your plants. However, if you have tropical plants and plants that really like it warm, you might want to wait until closer to the end of the month when nighttime temperatures are well over 50 degrees. Today I'm in the herb garden, and I'm going to start doing some planting of some of the more hardy herbs. And this one is a rosemary, and I've already dug my hole. And when you plant something, it's a good idea, I'll put the tag there, to water it 3 times. The first time you water the plant, and then we're going to water the hole, and I'll plant the plant. And this one doesn't have its roots too tangled up. We can kind of loosen them a little, but some plants are very root bound, and you do need to either cut off the bottom roots, that bottom layer, or at least loosen it some. But we're going to put this rosemary right into the hole and backfill it with the soil around it. I won't be fertilizing this at this time. It needs to put down its roots. And then we give it a good drink of water. And once you get your plants out, you need to be sure that you water them, and water them well as you go along. They can dry out really fast if we have more days like this, up into the 70s and sunny. So be sure to watch them once you get them into the ground. Another thing I'll be doing in the herb garden, I'll be cleaning up a little more, it needs it, is putting in my plant labels. This plant is rue. It's not a culinary herb. It probably was once a medicinal herb. But one of the things, you'll notice I didn't touch the plant, and I won't be touching it. I've cut it back, but this is a plant that can cause contact dermatitis in the sun. So be very careful not to touch it when it's sunny, and particularly not to prune it at that time, or you may end up with a painful rash on your hands and arms. Now I'm going to go up and plant another plant. And this one is going to be tarragon, which is another very hardy herb. Yeah, this is a perennial herb, but I decided I needed a new one. And so I've prepared the hole, and again, we're going to water 3 times. And this one's a little more root bound, you can see. So I want to really loosen these roots up so that they can go out into the soil. As a perennial plant, we want this to become hardy so that it will live on for many seasons. I'll backfill it with the soil. Press it down well. Rinse off my hands a little. And we've planted our first 2 herbs of the season. All of the nurseries now have their herbs available, so it's time to go and see what's available and bring some home and start enjoying them. We can enjoy some of the things right now. Sorrel, this is this plant, and it is best enjoyed when it's at its youngest. We're going to use some of that in the kitchen today. Also chives, they are not in bloom yet, but we can certainly cut them. And the best way to cut chives is with a pair of scissors. The same with the sorrel. I keep a pair of scissors just for garden pickings. And we can also pick lemon balm, lime balm, oregano, and not quite yet for mint, but we can also pick some of the thyme and winter savory that's come up from last year. Now let's head over to the perennial garden and take a look at what's coming up. The summer or spring bulbs have been really magnificent this year, and now they are starting to go, and with days like today where it's hot and warm, they're really starting to go. So we want to take the tops off as they brown out. And you can use a pair of scissors for this, or you can use your thumb and forefinger like I'm doing, and we'll get rid of those. Actually, if you have an unused area that's just kind of wild, you might want to throw these bulbs in there, and who knows, maybe in 5-10 years you'll have bulbs coming up. I find a few here and there that I did not plant. So anyway, we want to leave the greenery on the bulbs until it turns brown. And it's a real pain in the neck sometimes to do that, which is why I try to plant something near it that will kind of hide it. In this case, I've got a daylily in front of it and an aster behind it. We're still going to have some brown foliage, but the daffodils that were here have been worth it, so we'll just put up with them. It's important that they do die back naturally because they need to gather in the sun's energy in order to form good bulbs to bloom next year. Last year's summer of adequate rain and sun really promoted good bulbs, and we've had a lot of them. This year I decided to plant some gladiolas, and these are tall, spiky plants, and you plant them about 4 inches deep and about 4 or 5 inches apart, and 5 of them will take up about a square foot, so that's what I dug. And I'm going to spread them out in this hole, and you put them root side down and little nub up. These will be tall and spiky, and they'll bloom in the summer. I have a lot of spring bloomers, and I have some fall bloomers, but I wanted a few more summer bloomers. This is 10 bulbs, so I'll plant 5 here, and then I'll wait about 2 weeks and plant 5 more someplace else in the garden so that I will have a succession of bloom. These are very nice to cut, be part of arrangements. And let me fill it in. I'm going to use my shovel on this one. And just fill in on top of those bulbs. Having loosened all the soil, and oops, there's a nice rock I did not get out. We'll take that one out. And I'm going to just stomp it down lightly. And the most important thing here is to put the label in. Otherwise, I'm liable to come along, and I'm sure you would too, and plant something else there. And we don't want to do that, so we want to keep it labeled. Other things are starting to come up. We've got lilies, and right now I'm seeing one of the lily beetles that we don't want. They're red. I don't know if you can get a good view of this before it flies off, but I'm going to just crush it. You can put them in a can of soapy water or something, but I find just crushing them works as well as anything. They will disfigure your lilies. They aren't as prevalent as they used to be, but I'm still finding a few, so I do check my lilies regularly. Seems like it needs to be a sunny day for them to be out in full force. I've got Kamasa. It's about ready to bloom. It will have tall blue spikes. So we have a succession of bloom that will be starting. Iris is starting to bloom. I've got a few miniatures in a little further on. And this is a nectar garlic. Nectar sclerotum, I guess, is the name of it. And it has a kind of strange and wonderful bloom. It's a bulb. Nothing seems to bother it because it does have a bit of a garlic scent, which keeps most things away. Alliums are starting. They have little balls on them. They will turn into little starbursts very shortly. And we have a few of these miniature daffodils down in here. These are dark purple. And again, more of the daffodils to be pulled off. They just look a little better without the dead blooms, and it is better for the plant because the energy will go into the roots instead of into making seed and spreading it. Again, more lilies to check. And over in here I have planted some crocosmia, which is another tall spiky bulb, and it will be a perennial once it comes up the first time. But I planted that one already. And I'm filling in this area. I removed a large non-blooming hydrangea from here last year, so I'm filling in with some other plants. I've added a small delphinium and a nice yarrow, which will bloom in the fall. Moving along, the tree peony that's here has huge buds on it, and it will have dinner plate shaped flowers on it in another couple of weeks. Things are just moving right along. Now is the time to get into your garden, remove anything you don't want, things that have spread. I've been doing that. And also, it's time to start adding things. And I'm going to come over here and add some annuals already. Most of the annuals I'll wait and add later. But these are snapdragons. And I'm going to put 3 of them here. And then I'll put 3 in another spot a little later. And again, these need to be loosened up at the bottom a bit. And then we can put them right in. Well, we're going to water the holes. Take out any roots we find. And I'd already watered the plants. I'll water this set again. Then we'll pop these in. Snapdragons are quite cold tolerant. We could have probably planted these a couple weeks ago, but I'm getting them in now. A little late doing some of my garden chores this year, but working steadily, they will all get done. The later daffodils are still blooming. And we have a few tulips here and there. And most of the perennials have come up already. And down in here, I have pulled out some of them. I use these wires. I cut them as supports. They start out as tomato cages, and I can cut one tomato cage into 3 pieces using bolt cutters. And not only do I use them to support the plants, I also use them to mark off how much of a plant I want. If I have a lot that needs to be dug out, I'm thinking bee balm is one that spreads very rapidly, as do black-eyed Susans. I put one of the circles around it and then dig out everything around it to kind of limit the amount that I have. The little dwarf irises have been very nice this spring. I got another one to take off here. And I have several colors. I've got a powder blue, a blue and white, and a dark purple, the dark purple that we saw over on the other side of the garden. Again, daffodils are early, late, and mid blooming. Here it seems like once we warm up, everything kind of grows in together, but these definitely are later than some of the early ones, which have been gone for about a week and a half. So if you try to get some of each, you'll have a longer season of daffodils. This plant is a primrose and it needs dividing. It's been beautiful, but I need to spread it out a little bit and add it into some other front areas of the garden. There's always something to be divided and moved in a garden, and always some weeds to pull. These are 2 plants that are a little different. These are botanical tulips, and I've been purchasing botanical tulips the last couple years, and I'm going to continue to do so. They are in some of the specialty catalogs, and the catalogs are coming out right now, bulb catalogs. If you're on any of the lists, you'll be getting bulb catalogs. If not, just check online and I'm sure you'll find someone that would love to send you one. Botanical tulips tend to be more perennial than the regular large tulip bulbs. These have been here a couple years, and they're very pretty, they're very petite, and they tend to be fairly long-lasting in the garden. This one is called Honky Tonk, and I particularly like this one. It will get a little shading of pink or orange on the outside of the petals as it ages. This plant is called Leucojum, and it's also a bulb, and it looks like snowdrops or lily of the valley on steroids. And it is a bulb, and again, it has these white bell blooms. And I first saw this down at Blythewald in Rhode Island. They had it mixed in with the daffodils in their daffodil wood, and it was very effective. And I decided that I should try planting some, and it's been quite successful, both here in the shade and also in my back area in the shade. So that's a bulb that will take a little bit of shade, more than the tulips. Now let's head down into the vegetable garden and see what's happening there. The strawberries are now in full bloom, and that looks like we might have a very nice crop of strawberries early in June. Strawberries do not like frost, and it doesn't look like we're going to get any frost, but I am aware of the weather forecast. If in fact we were to start thinking about getting a frost, or they forecast one for our area, which can happen well into May, I would come out and cover the strawberries with something. Sheets, landscape fabric, pretty much anything you have to keep the blossoms from turning black in the middle, and that will ruin them and they will not produce any berries. Very similar to when the peaches were in blossom last year and got frozen and there was no peach crop. So we want to keep our strawberry crop going, and if there were to be a frost, we could cover them and save them. So you have to kind of be aware of your local weather forecast when you have a garden. I've lined out the garden. I've planned it. The idea is to plan putting things, for the most part, where they did not grow last year. It's very hard to completely rotate crops, but I try to keep it so that nothing grows in the same place for 3 years in a row. Doesn't always work out. I sometimes run out of space. I've already planted my peas and green onions, some spinach, and some lettuce. The spinach will appreciate some cooler days. The lettuce will appreciate them as well. I also have some carrots and some Chinese vegetables planted. It's time to plant most anything in the garden now, and I have a variety of things that can be planted. I do put it out on paper and mark where I've planted things. Then if something doesn't come up, I know what it was, at least. And I know when I planted it and when it should come up. But I keep track of it as I go. I've already marked in my tomatoes and my 2 teepees that will hold the cucumbers, 2 different varieties that I grow. Those are kind of givens. And then I'll work around that to plant the rest of my crops. Today I'm going to plant a few beets. And beets have fairly large seeds, but you need to make them a little ways apart, because each of the seeds will produce several different plants, which you'll have to thin out later. So you might as well start with them a little further apart. And again, we'll just drop them into the trench I've dug with my hoe. And these are quick to mature, so we can plant more later. And where I stop with the beets, and I'll continue this with perpetual spinach, some dill, cilantro. I'm just going to smooth it over and then pat it down well. It's supposed to rain tonight, so that will be very good for it. And I'm going to put a nice rock at the corner of each of these. I'll put a stake there later. And then I will just continue planting those as we go. I'm not going to plant these right now, but I will later this evening. In the hot sun is not a great spot to plant, time to plant. It's best if you wait until an evening before a day of rain. That will really set your plants up to grow well. These are celery plants that I purchased, and celery grows just fine here, and it really tastes different than the one you buy in the store. And I'll set these about 8 or 10 inches apart, and have a few plants that I can cut off pieces of celery whenever I need it. Again, we'll continue planting, and by the end of the month I will be putting in peppers and tomatoes and anything that requires really, really warm temperatures. You can set them in now, but if we have a cooler spell, it will hold them back. If you have space inside or in a greenhouse to hold them, it's better for the plants to wait just a little bit until things really settle and the soil temperature warms up a great deal. I head back this way. One of the early crops that I can pick now is rhubarb. We're going to use some of that in the kitchen today. And I can also pick the number of little violets that I have growing around. And I'm going to be doing some candied violets as well as using some of the little violas that pop up as a decoration on some desserts. It's nice to use the edible flowers in your garden and also any edible crops. We also have lovage, and lovage is a celery flavored herb. It makes a large, I think, attractive bush. It's very much a strong celery flavor. It's very good in salads. Can be used in place of celery. And the stems are hollow, so if you want to make a straw for your Bloody Mary, there you have it. A lovage stem will work just fine. This is an old-fashioned herb. It was used in colonial times when they didn't even have celery in this country. And again, a little goes a long ways, but I find it to be an attractive plant, and it grows well in the full sun, which is why I have it in the vegetable garden. These are the milk jugs and water jugs and juice jugs that I seeded in February and March and put outside. Forgot about them, and now we have seedlings. I've opened them up. They were ultimately taped shut, and I cut the tape, and these are larkspur, and they are ready very soon to be replanted into the garden. And I have a variety of these. Again, I took the covers off, and we'll need to keep them watered if we don't get adequate rain until they're put in the garden. I have broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, a number of different flowers, and they will all find their way into a garden somewhere around here. This area then will be used to plant dahlias and canna lilies. I haven't gotten them out. They can be planted at any time now. I need to make some space. Dahlias are a tuber or a bulb, and they will be blooming in the fall. So I have them inside still in storage. I'll be getting them out, dividing them, and planting them probably this weekend. I want to note that if you are looking for perennials, the Garden Club sale is this Saturday the 18th, rain date the next day, Sunday, and you'll find a wide variety of plants from various members' gardens. And the prices are good, the people are friendly, so come on down to Town Hill early on Saturday to get the best plants. Let's head around and go back to the shade garden. A lot of people feel that you can't grow anything in the shade. That's not quite true. I find the shade garden to be one of my favorite areas pretty much all year. We're starting out with a nice bleeding heart. Actually, we started out with hellebores, and the hellebores grow extremely well in the shade, especially if it's slightly damp. And they have pink flowers, usually pink or white, sometimes green, and they start blooming in about March. Now, I will be cutting the flowers off these because they have spread all over, and I need to kind of limit the growth, so I will try to prevent them from going to seed this year, although some of them inevitably do. Those I dig up and can share. Also, we have a plant called epimedium, and I like to call these little fairy flowers. They come in various shades of pink, white, orange, purple. I have several different kinds of epimedium, white, and they're here and there throughout the garden. Of course, ferns grow extremely well in this condition, and hosta, and there's one coming up, a large one, that's on its way up. And we had some bloodroot, which is a native plant interspersed in here. This is the root of the leaf of the bloodroot. The flowers are gone, but the leaves continue for a little while. And this is a plant called pachyphragma, which is a ground cover type plant with white blooms that are out of bloom at this time. So there's quite a bit. Oh, and there's some tiarella in here. which is another low-growing plant which will have pink spikes on it, pink or white spikes, a little bit later into May. So there are a lot of things that you can grow in the shade if you are determined to have something in bloom, or at least some variety in foliage throughout the season. And it's a cool place to work and to sit, and very peaceful to be in the shade. Now let's walk down. Oh, I've got one right here too. Okay. Yeah. I think I better, yeah, if you can find.
Yeah. Oh.
These blue blooms are from Brunera, and this is just the standard Brunera. There are also cultivars that have white on the leaves in various patterns. This one, it blooms in the spring. The standard variety tends to spread a bit. Again, you have some to share. And it moves around a little bit in the garden as it does spread. We'll move down now into the pond area. This area around where some trees were removed, actually one of them fell and had to be removed, and the other one was removed because it was in danger of falling. But we left the stumps, and around the stumps I have a variety of plants, and right now they tend to look a little nice. It's a part shade area. It will become mostly shady as the season goes on. And I have a variety of plants. The blue plants are Mertensia, and Mertensia is a native plant, and it's a spring ephemeral, meaning that it's here today and it'll be gone later on, but there's plenty to take its place. I have twin leaf in here, which will have some leaves, and it will have some flowers later. And we have a lot of fern and some hostas, large hostas. The ground cover is sweet woodruff, and this is the May wine herb, and it will go out of bloom. You don't have to deadhead it or anything. It just gracefully stops blooming, and then you have a nice green ground cover for the rest of the summer. I have worked with this area a little bit, but the Mertensia has spread all on its own. There's also a bleeding heart in there, and that particular bleeding heart is the native bleeding heart, native to this area, unlike the larger one, which is not native, but still grows extremely well here and comes in both pink and white. The native one is just the pink, or quite a dark pink. Now let's take a look at the pond. The pond is dirty. I haven't cleaned it yet. What I will do ultimately is, when I get a little help from one of my sons, is lower the level of the water a bit, and then we'll add the waterfall in the filtration system and add more water. You can see we do have fish. The 5 fish are still there, and the frogs are very happy with it. Actually, the frogs tend to like it a little dirtier. I think there's more food source for them as they sit on the side of the pond or even in it. But this has not been done yet. I'm using the fall-winter food right now while the temperature is around 50, although today is hotter. Then we'll be moving into the summer food, which is a little heartier for them. And they do get hungry on a hot day. As you can see, they come right up when I throw some food in. We have a nice little frog here, a little green frog. And there's probably 2 or 3 others that we don't see. I see them now and again, and they tend to kind of stay in the area. Again, another hosta, and I have so many hostas, and I need to use deer off. We also have deer. We have a bear that's been in the area too, which has forced me to take down my bird feeders just in case, so that they don't get torn up, and we don't really want to attract him right into the backyard. But the deer off I use on the hostas, and I'll go around every couple weeks and spray the hosta. Hosta are the one thing that I have that deer really like. They don't like the hellebores. The hellebore foliage is quite poisonous, so they don't bother with that. But they certainly will ruin a whole area of hosta very quickly if you don't protect it some way. The other thing that like hosta, besides me, are slugs. And I use a product called Sluggo. And it doesn't take too much, but you just kind of sprinkle it around the base of your plants. It's an iron product, and it adds to the soil. It is not dangerous for children or pets, and that's important to me. Some of the older slug baits are very, very toxic to any animals that might get into it. This is not, and it seems to work quite well. You just have to use it, especially if it's rainy and slugs. And if you start early with it and keep using it, you should have fewer damages from slugs. The slugs tend to make huge holes in the leaves. They start out making small holes, but then as the hosta expands, it becomes a large hole. So if you can keep them away from it in the first place, you're better off and you'll have better hostas. One of the things I really enjoy doing is just sitting out here and enjoying watching the fish and the frogs and the greenery as everything comes up. My chair needs a little paint, my house needs a little paint. I have a lot of plants stored in my little house, which has a plexiglass wall on the south side, so we get some nice sun in there. In fact, it'll get up to 90 degrees, even if it's only 50 out if we have sunshine. So we have a lot of sun, and it's good for the plants. I will move them out here to kind of acclimate them to the weather, and then they'll move into the garden gradually. Again, you want to keep your plants that have been inside. You don't want to shock them with coming out on a day like today where it's 75 degrees all at once. Make sure they come out gradually. Okay, now let's go inside and see what's going on in there besides air conditioning. These are some of the plants that I grew from cuttings. We took cuttings last August, September time frame, and I've been pinching them back, but they've still gotten a bit leggy. These are scented geraniums. They will go into the herb garden, but not quite yet. They'll probably take a trip out to the greenhouse and spend another week or so out there in order to become acclimated. I'll leave the door open on nice days so that they get some fresh air and some outdoor sunshine to get used to it. This was one of the amaryllis I got at Christmas time, and it was presented to me wrapped in wax. And many of you have seen these, and I think Trader Joe's was one of the stores that had them, and a number of the nurseries also had them. And they, you don't do anything with them. You just set them on the table and they bloom. And it did. And I cut off the bloom stem when I was finished with it, and then I took off the wax. And they cut off the roots when they put the wax on, so I guess you would think that they wouldn't grow again. But I put it in a pot with some potting soil, and lo and behold, it grew. It not only grew, it put on another bloom just now. So if you get those coated in wax, if you wish, you could throw them away, but if you'd like to save them, pot them up and you might get another bloom or at least some foliage. My amaryllis that I have had bloom after this is cut off, I'll plant it outside and it will grow very nice roots. I'll bring them in the fall and we'll start the bloom cycle all over again. The only problem is I'm getting too many of them, so I'm going to have to start giving them as gifts, I guess. Now another thing that I'm planting, and on this one I'm using my heat mat, and that gives a little gentle bottom heat to the pots. And what I'm planting are caladiums. And caladiums are foliage plants that grow in the shade, and they have a strange, funny little knobby growth. And sometimes it's really hard to tell which ends up on these. So if you plant them on their side, That's about the best you can do. And I have my potting soil here, and we'll just cover it gently and mat it down and add it. Again, these will be large pink and white leaves later on. After many of the bulbs and other things are gone, we need something to fill in. And these will be some of the fillers for the shade garden, or perhaps on the patio in a sunny area. Again, the bottom heat helps them sprout, and once they've sprouted, I'll plant them outdoors. By then, the temperatures will be warming up considerably. Now, let's go in the kitchen and see what we can make there. Today, I'm going to use some of the things that I've picked from the garden to make a spring luncheon. And this will be either for a couple friends or perhaps your mother. Just a nice little spring get-together. I'm going to start by making a rhubarb cake because that needs to go in the oven. And I'll start with this is an easy rhubarb cake. 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. And we'll add to that 1/3 of a cup of oil. I'm using canola oil. You could use any type of vegetable oil. We'll add an egg. Half a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of baking soda. And a half a cup of milk. Buttermilk, in fact. Half a cup of buttermilk. And I'm going to whisk this together until it all comes together and the lumps in the brown sugar kind of break up. I'm going to rinse this off because I'll need it again. Then I'll add a 1.25 cups of all-purpose flour and stir that in. And that should be fairly smooth. And then I'll add a 1.5 cups of chopped rhubarb. Rhubarb is pulled rather than cut. You just pull out a leaf and then you cut off the leaves. The leaves can be composted, but they can't be consumed because they are toxic. But the stems are delicious, very tart and very delicious. And we'll mix in the rhubarb. This makes a moist cake. It can be served with whipped cream or ice cream or even vanilla yogurt. I'm going to put this into a greased and wax paper lined 8-inch baking pan. And this will go in the oven for about 35 minutes until it is somewhat firm on top. Cool it in the pan for about 10 minutes and then it can be removed from the pan. The next thing I'm going to get ready, are some sea scallops or bay scallops, your choice. And I get this melting too. So I'm going to melt about a tablespoon of butter. And I'll get my pans ready. And I will be making a sauce to put on them. First I want to heat my pan, and I'm just going to saute them a little bit. I don't want to cook them through because they are going to go into the oven with the sauce shortly before being consumed. And it doesn't take long to cook scallops. Now it's starting to bubble a little, so I'm going to add a pound of scallops. These have been rinsed and dried a bit. And again, I just want to brown them a little bit. So I'm going to turn them over. Just very slightly cook them on both sides. And there's a couple that didn't get turned. Scallops cook very quickly. I am going to now remove these to my little scallop dishes. And we'll divide them between the dishes, 4 or 5 to each one. I think we have. Again, this is a luncheon, not a major dinner, so perhaps a little less. One here. And I would add a little more butter if I needed it, and I don't know that I need it. Maybe a little bit. And I need to turn the heat down a little bit too. And I'm going to add 1 shallot chopped. We're making the sauce now. And I just want to saute that pretty well. And when they get slightly browned, I'm going to deglaze the pan with a little wine. And I need to figure out how much. Well, about 2 tablespoons. Let this cook down a little bit. And now I'm going to add a cup of heavy cream. And we'll stir that and heat it and let it cook down until it thickens a bit. And we're just going to watch the pot. Okay, our sauce is thickened up a bit, quite a bit. And I'm going to add half a cup of chopped sorrel. And we're going to let that cook down. And the sauce will thicken slightly more, but not too much. And now I'm going to spoon it into my little dishes onto my scallops. And I'm going to sprinkle the tops with the little crumbs. And these will go into a hot oven for just a few minutes, probably about 5, until the scallops are done. Right before cooking, and at this point I could put them in the refrigerator and heat them later to finish cooking them. Well, the next thing I'm going to do is something with asparagus, which is also in season. I once had some asparagus, but putting in a new septic system kind of got rid of my asparagus bed. So I no longer have that option, but I certainly can find some local asparagus to buy. It's grown a great deal in Massachusetts, actually, out in the western part of the state. And I'm going to make what is called asparagus mimosa, and I was planning to look it up, but I didn't get around to it. But it is, I guess, a famous type dish. And I have 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice to that. And I've cooked the asparagus already. It's already been cooked. I cook it in the microwave. You can cook it, you can roast it, you can boil it, however you wish to cook it. We're going to pour this butter sauce over the asparagus. And then I'm going to garnish it with hard-cooked egg. And this is part of the mimosa part, I guess. And we're going to make a kind of a design around the edge. Top 2. And then put the egg yolk in the middle. Perhaps that is supposed to look like a flower. But this is egg or asparagus and mimosa. And that will go on our table a little later. The next thing I'm going to do is work with some violets. And on my Facebook, one of the Facebook pages I go to, I showed candying violets, and it really is quite simple to do, and they last quite a long time. After I make these candied violets, I do put them in the freezer, and a little tin or plastic box, and they will last forever, it seems. What I'm doing now is I'm coating the petals of the violets that I picked outside with egg white. And this is not real egg white because they are edible. And it's meringue powder, which you can get at any craft store. They make frostings with it, and then dipped in fine sugar. And then you just put them upside down on a piece of wax paper. You coat both sides. Yes, I know it's quicker to dip them, but they come up really gloppy if you dip them in the egg white mixture. But what I did is I mixed up the powdered meringue powder with the water, with the directions for 1 egg, and then dip them and in the sugar, and you can sit and do quite a few of these. And they are very nice as a little garnish in the middle of winter when nothing else is available in your garden. You can also do rose petals, mint leaves, lilac blossoms. I found that the darker color flowers last longer. If you're using them right away, you could do the lighter colored ones, but the darker ones tend to last very nicely and keep their color. When I let them dry first, and then I take off the stems and pack them in the tins in the freezer. And you'll probably see them again sometime on some of the things I cook. It's kind of a rite of spring for me to candy the violets and then later on the rose petals and have them available. So that's all there is to it. It's pretty easy. However, you can use violas, and these are violas that again came up in my garden. And these have not been sugared. You can sugar them, but I just pop them on top of a frosted cookie as a little garnish. And they are edible, and I would not suggest using purchased pansies if you intend to consume them like this. Something you've grown is going to be pesticide free, dependably, and most flowers that you buy are not pesticide free. So you want to use something that grew in your garden instead. Now let's put our lunch on the table and invite our friends. Here we are in the dining room and ready to serve a luncheon for 4 people. We have our scallops with sorrel, and I'm pointing out the things that we did use from the garden. Also, I have used chives to make some chive and cheddar scones. Again, any scone recipe or even a drop biscuit recipe, you can add some cheddar and some chives, and chives go well with so many different things. We have the asparagus mimosa, asparagus being in season, and we have a rhubarb cake and our little sugar cookies with a garnish of violas. The flowers are also from the garden. I picked a few blossoms from the crabapple tree, a few from the apple tree, a few of these lovely little miniature iris, and some English bluebells to fit in. So we're ready for lunch, and I thank you for joining me today for a walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you've been watching NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television.